My best friend said I was the heart of our startup, until the moment she ripped that heart out, filed the company under her name, and watched me bleed in silence. She left me with nothing but prototypes in cardboard boxes and a name no one would believe anymore. But I wasn't confused. I wasn't dead. And while she posed for Forbes and called herself a visionary, I was building something else. Slow, patient, precise. What comes next isn't revenge. It's a reckoning. And trust me, it's the kind you don't see coming until it's already too late. My best friend stole my startup and left me for dead. Not metaphorically, literally. I collapsed during our final demo rehearsal. My heart was pounding so hard, I couldn't hear myself think. My hands went cold, my breath short. I blacked out mid-sentence, with code still loading on the screen. And when I opened my eyes, I was in a hospital bed, staring at ceiling tiles I didn't recognize. No visitors, no flowers, no text messages, just the faint beeping of a heart monitor and a dry mouth that tasted like betrayal. She never came. Not once. While I lay there, hooked to machines, unable to sit up, she took everything. My email access? Gone. My GitHub permissions? Revoked. The company registration we were supposed to finalize together? She filed it solo, under her name. No mention of me. And when investors asked why I wasn't in the cap table, she said I'd had a breakdown. That I couldn't handle the stress of leadership, that she was protecting the vision. I was the vision. The product was mine. Every flow, every feature, every sleepless night spent debugging while she wrote press releases about our dream. I built it with shaking hands and burnt-out eyes. And she took it, repackaged it, and stood on stage announcing a launch as if she had built it from scratch. I watched her TEDx talk from a friend's couch, still on painkillers, while she beamed in a blush pink pantsuit and told the world she'd started from nothing. That nothing was me. And the worst part? People believed her. Journalists published glowing profiles. She made Forbes 30 under 30. I couldn't even get a recruiter to return my emails. One person built a legacy. The other got erased. But here's the thing about people you bury too early. Sometimes we claw our way back. And when we do, we don't come back to forgive. We come back to rewrite the ending. She buried me under my own dream. But I dug my way out, and I built a revenge strategy with timestamps, tax forms, and tribunal filings. Not out of spite, out of survival. And no, I didn't want an apology. I wanted her empire to crumble. Publicly, painfully, and with my name stamped on every fault line. Because some stories aren't meant to be shared. Some are meant to be taken back. You've heard of betrayal, but have you ever been erased? Keep watching. Because what she did next didn't just break me. It redefined what cruelty in business looks like. I wasn't even allowed into the building anymore. The same lobby I used to walk through every morning with a triple shot espresso and a flash drive full of breakthroughs. Now guarded by a man who stared at his tablet, scrolled once, and said flatly, "You're not on the list." Like I was a stranger. Like I'd never written the first line of code in the product they were now pitching as revolutionary. I pressed him, told him to check again. He called someone upstairs, nodded and said, "You'll have to leave." I did. I left. But not before I looked up at the 21st floor and imagined setting it on fire with my silence. My calendar, gone. My access to our shared servers, revoked. My name, which had once sat proudly next to hers on every slide of our pitch deck, had been stripped out of the version she was now sending to investors. I called the lawyer we'd both used, the one I introduced her to, the one who knew this company existed because of me. He answered. I said my name, and he hung up. She told the world I had stepped away for mental health reasons. They applauded her bravery, said she was so supportive. She tweeted about founder burnout and self-care while I was crying into my scarf on a public bus, trying to figure out how I'd pay rent. I couldn't even log into our back-end system to prove it was my code. The one thing I had left, my voice, was useless in a space that had already closed the door and thrown away the key. I tried emailing press contacts, mutual friends, former mentors. No one responded. One journalist wrote back, asking, "Didn't you quit?" That was the moment I realized it wasn't just betrayal, it was a rewrite. And then came her offer, $10,000 and a non-disclosure agreement. 10 grand to pretend none of it ever happened. 10 grand to keep my name buried beneath her brand. My bank account showed $82.47. I didn't even have enough to renew my domain name, but I told her no. I told her to choke on it. That night, the same night she announced her Series A, posted photos of herself toasting champagne with men in navy suits, I slept in my friend's attic next to the cardboard boxes holding rejected prototypes I had designed for her. It was cold. I used one of my old pitch hoodies as a blanket, and in that quiet, windowless room, I finally stopped waiting for justice. I decided I'd build the storm that would wipe her clean off the board. If you were in my place, with nothing left but silence and $82 in your bank account, what would you do? Stay down, or start sharpening your mind like a blade? I started over from nothing. No title, no recognition. Just me, a pair of trembling hands, and a chipped ceramic mug that refilled itself every shift at the dingy co-op cafe in a downtown basement. By day, I steamed milk for tech bros who quoted productivity hacks they didn't understand. By night, I sat on borrowed Wi-Fi, scrolling through case files from the SEC, enrolling in online boot camps about data security and regulatory compliance. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't visible, but every second was fuel. While she was striking power poses for Forbes under golden lighting, I was learning how to dismantle a company from the inside out, bolt by bolt, clause by clause. I traced her investors, most of whom she'd met through me. I studied their funding history, the shell accounts she used to shuffle capital without drawing attention. I recognized the APIs she developed as nothing more than skinned versions of open source code, and I saved everything, every timestamp, every signature, every contradiction between her narrative and the truth I once lived. I didn't want revenge, not in the beginning. I just wanted leverage. But as the cracks in her empire widened, I realized something else. She didn't build a company, she built a trap. And I had been the first casualty. Her greatest weakness wasn't ambition, it was speed. She thought rapid growth gave her immunity from oversight. She thought if she kept expanding fast enough, no one would stop to ask the right questions. But I had all the time in the world. I created a new identity, new name, new resume, new purpose. I applied for an analyst position at a mid-tier VC firm with no flash, just reach. They hired me. I said little. I kept to myself. I watched the deal flow pipeline like a hawk in the rafters. And then, one afternoon, there it was, her company, front and center in the next round of due diligence. I stared at the name like it was a ghost daring me to speak. And for the first time in years, I smiled. Quiet, cold, certain. It wasn't about healing anymore. It was about precision, about playing the long game in a room she didn't know I was in. I wasn't confused. I wasn't delusional, and I damn sure wasn't dead. Just when you think I'm rebuilding quietly, that's when I strike first. Ready to hear how one anonymous leak turned her world upside down? I started with a whisper. A digital envelope slipped into a journalist's inbox through an encrypted server, stripped of metadata, signed with a name that didn't exist. Attached was an internal audit report I'd pulled from the shadows of her infrastructure. One that revealed what I already knew. User data, stored without encryption, openly accessible through misconfigured cloud permissions. It violated GDPR. It violated CCPA. It violated every illusion she'd sold about ethical tech and user-first design. Within a week, the company was summoned to testify. Headlines swirled like vultures. She posted a crying selfie on LinkedIn with the caption, "Painful but necessary growth," as if she hadn't built that risk herself with shortcuts and arrogance. While she spun apologies and hashtags, I moved quietly. Through a blind trust, I acquired 2.7% equity, small enough to avoid attention, just enough to secure a seat on the next advisory call. I didn't want control. I wanted presence. I wanted proximity. I wanted her to hear my voice, in the one place she thought she'd erased it forever. The call began with typical corporate jargon: cash burn, strategic pivots, meaningless optimism. Then I unmuted. "We're conducting a code provenance review," I said calmly. "There's a flagged block of annotations tied to an open source commit. Can you clarify the origin of this line?" I read the string. Her CTO shifted, but I wasn't talking to him. I said her name. "These annotations match a commit from my GitHub, circa 18 months before your first funding round. Would you care to comment on that?" Silence. Not defensive, not confused, just still. That silence? That was the sound of a fraud recognizing the first domino. That was the moment her brain sprinted through every lie she'd ever told, trying to calculate if this one could be buried too. But it was already too late. I didn't need a courtroom. I didn't need a headline. I just needed the truth to echo in a room where she thought I'd never be heard again. And when someone asked if I wanted to pursue legal action, I shook my head and smiled. "No," I said. "I want to go biblical." "You thought that was satisfying?" "Oh no, that was just the opening move. What comes next?" It's the kind of public humiliation you'll feel secondhand. The boardroom was colder than usual, not in temperature, but in atmosphere. Sterile, expectant, and ready for blood. I sat near the far end of the long oak table, flanked by two directors whose trust I'd earned in whispers, strategy decks, and late-night calls they didn't know I orchestrated. The usual pleasantries barely lasted 2 minutes before I raised my hand. "I'd like to request a full financial transparency audit," I said. My voice was calm, deadpan, surgical. No one laughed. They leaned in. I slid the folder across the polished wood. Inside, evidence of offshore accounts never disclosed, testimonial inconsistencies buried in investor filings, and one patent, her prized jewel, that I proved never existed. It wasn't a claim, it was a demonstration, page by page, timestamp by timestamp. I didn't just accuse her. I reconstructed her lies like a forensic architect, piece by piece, motive by motive. Then came the final blow. I pulled up a projection screen and played the email thread. Her name at the top, mine below, dated and time-stamped. Her words, "Let's trim the process. If we can skip compliance and beat the market to launch, we control the narrative." She ended it with a smiley face emoji, the kind of arrogance that ages like a curse. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to her. She stood, pale, lips parted, one trembling hand gripping the back of her chair like it could hold her up. Her voice caught in her throat. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Her jaw clenched, her eyes darted to the exit, and for a brief second, I thought she might run. But she stayed. She had to. The board called an emergency vote. She watched it happen in real time, her authority unraveling with each raised hand, each nod of disapproval, each executive who couldn't meet her gaze. Her empire had no roof, and the rain had finally started falling. Later, someone asked me, "Was that revenge?" I looked up from my notes, smiled faintly, and said, "No, that was accounting." Some people tear down empires with fire. I used 10 words and the billboard. Stick around because poetic justice is just getting started. I didn't need to break her windows. I just needed to buy the street outside. It started with a domain name, the original one we'd brainstormed in my dorm room, the one she let expire once her company became too big for nostalgia. I bought it back, not to revive it, but to bury her with it. I rebuilt it as a digital graveyard. Screenshots of our old prototypes, commit histories stamped with my initials, pitch slides bearing my signature, every forgotten fingerprint she tried to wipe clean. It wasn't loud, it was undeniable. Then I found the billboard, 3 blocks from her new glass and steel office tower, just above the morning coffee queue, where all her VPs lined up with noise-canceling headphones and fragile egos. I rented it for 6 months, up front, and I filled it with 10 words, in bold white font on black. Nothing else. This idea was stolen, and I'm still here. That week, her Series C investor pulled out. Not with a bang, just a press release and a quiet line about reassessing alignment. I heard her try to spin it, as market correction. No one bought it. Her team began whispering. Industry gossip went feral. Every potential partner Googled her company and saw my domain. Every journalist who clicked through got the truth, in my words, on my terms. She called me. I didn't answer. She called again and again. I let them ring. Then I mailed her a single sheet of paper, folded once. No threats, no insults. Just one line, written in the same font we used to joke was too dramatic for pitch decks. Turns out your biggest security vulnerability was me. I never signed it. I didn't have to. Because by then, everyone already knew. You've seen her fall. Now, let me show you what rising looks like. On my own terms, with no spotlight, just purpose. I didn't rebuild the same company. That chapter was over. I built something new, something that couldn't be stolen. This time the foundation wasn't just code or vision. It was integrity. I structured the company with ironclad founder protections, an ethics council with real authority, and a line item in the budget dedicated to legal education for every employee. It wasn't about scaling fast. It was about scaling right. We didn't chase press. We chased purpose. And no, I didn't care to be on the cover of any magazine. I'd already learned that glossy pages are thin. What I wanted was something heavier. I wanted women to stop disappearing from the companies they gave birth to. I wanted their names to stay on the patents they designed, their roles to stay on the decks they authored, their voices to stay in the rooms they built. Now, I give talks, panels, workshops. Not because I want to be heard, but because I know what it costs to be silenced. I mention her name, not to ruin her, but to remind people what erasure looks like in a power suit. I say it slowly, clearly, in rooms filled with rising founders and investors taking notes. Because I want them to understand, theft doesn't become innovation just because you put it in heels and give it seed funding. I still walk past the billboard sometimes, even though it's been taken down. In its place now is an ad for a fintech app that claims to revolutionize trust. I laugh at that, not bitterly, just quietly. I have learned that real trust is not declared, it's demonstrated. And it's protected like a fragile heirloom passed down between women who know how easy it is for someone to snatch it when you're not looking. At home, things are simpler now. My mornings begin with jasmine tea and an overwatered basil plant that refuses to die. I'm learning to cook, not to impress, just to nourish. Sometimes my niece visits. We bake, badly. She talks about school, and I listen. Really listen. I ask questions. I remember things. Because now I have space for it. Because no one is draining me dry in the name of ambition. The house is small. Light pours through the kitchen window in a way that makes shadows feel optional. There's a chipped bowl on the counter that I keep meaning to replace, but never do, because it holds the scent of the first lemons I bought after it was all over. I remember slicing them, watching the juice bead on the blade, and thinking for the first time in years, this is mine. This moment belongs to me. I plant things now, on the balcony, nothing fancy, just mint, thyme, cherry tomatoes that sometimes grow crooked. But they grow. I do too. Sometimes the past knocks. Reporters who want the untold story. Former colleagues who want to apologize. I smile. I thank them. And then I say no. Because peace, I've learned, isn't loud. It doesn't require explanation. It just needs room. The last time she tried to contact me, it was through a shared acquaintance. She wanted to reconnect, to clear the air. I didn't reply, not out of anger, but because some endings are meant to stay closed, like burned pages you don't rewrite. Instead, I sat down to write something else, a letter to a young founder who had reached out after one of my talks. She'd been edged out of her prototype by a professor. She thought it meant the end. I told her it wasn't. I told her what I wished someone had told me. Your worth is not decided by who credits you. It's decided by what you do next. And when she wrote back, saying thank you, that she'd started again, I made tea and stepped outside into the soft morning air. The wind carried the scent of basil, and somewhere, a neighbor's wind chime sang. It was quiet, and I was finally free. Think it ends with my healing? You might want to stay a little longer, because the final blow came from silence. She left the city in silence. No press release, no farewell party. Just a line in an article somewhere that said she was pivoting. That was her favorite word, pivot. She'd once used it to justify gutting half our roadmap and replacing it with glossy nonsense investors could drool over. But this pivot wasn't strategic. It was survival. She packed what she had left into boxes someone else carried and moved to a smaller city, a quiet one, a cheaper one. There, she tried to reinvent herself, again, this time as a leadership coach for female founders navigating difficult transitions. Her website had pastel gradients and a blurry photo of her holding a mug, laughing at nothing. But the internet doesn't forget. Not the forums, the leaked memos, the articles that followed the crash. Not the former employees who started speaking out once they no longer feared the NDAs. Not the LinkedIn post she'd written during the scandal, claiming she'd been blindsided by internal miscommunications. People remember lies when they've been printed on their paychecks. Her Twitter threads barely lasted a day before they were ripped apart. Retweets laced with sarcasm. Quote tweets that posted screenshots of her past, alongside captions like, "Leadership tip number 1, don't steal." Sponsors pulled out, bookings vanished. The coaching brand dissolved before it ever fully formed, not with a bang, but a slow bleed of silence. She tried again under a different name. The algorithm still found her. Her old team? They were gone. Some had joined competitors, others had left the industry entirely. The COO she once called her ride or die blocked her. Her legal counsel refused to take her calls. And the investors who once called her the next unicorn queen now used her name as a cautionary tale in boardroom whispers. She had been lightning in a bottle once. Now, she was a warning label. I saw her at a small networking event nearly a year later. Not a major conference, just a side panel in a shared co-working space. I wasn't there to see her. I was invited by someone else, asked to speak on building ethical startup culture. Funny that. She walked in 10 minutes late, sat near the back, didn't sign up to speak, just hovered. I felt her before I saw her, like the chill that enters the room just before a storm collapses. Her eyes scanned the room, then landed on mine. She didn't flinch. She didn't nod. She didn't even scowl. She looked straight through me, as if I were a shadow she hoped wasn't real. But her hands betrayed her, trembling slightly, one resting over the other, gripping hard enough to whiten her knuckles. She wore beige, nothing like the sharp power suits she used to flaunt. Her hair tied back in a way that tried to look effortless, but screamed of someone trying too hard to disappear. I didn't approach her. I didn't need to. My presence did the talking. She sat through the whole panel, staring at the floor, nodding at points that had nothing to do with her. When the applause came, she didn't clap. When the room emptied, she was the first to leave, brushing past someone who called her name without answering. I heard them ask if that was really her. No one confirmed. No one chased. Later, I saw her name on a newsletter for a webinar that never aired. Her photo was replaced with a stock image. I heard she tried freelancing, that she cold emailed startup incubators for speaking slots, that she'd offered to mentor women she once dismissed as not ready. I never saw her in tech again. People asked if I was satisfied, if I felt avenged. I told them no, because this wasn't vengeance. It was gravity, a natural consequence pulled by the weight of her own lies. I never had to push. I only had to step out of the way. And the most devastating punishment of all, she had to live with the knowledge that I didn't just survive her, I surpassed her. And I never needed to raise my voice. I just stayed standing. I teach now. Not code, not market analysis, not pitch strategy. I teach something harder, something sharper. A masterclass titled, How to Armor Your Startup Against Betrayal. The seats fill fast, mostly women, some young, still carrying wide-eyed hope, some older, with bruises they don't talk about yet. And in every session, before I speak, I write one quote on the screen behind me. No credits, no explanation. If someone tries to write you out of your own story, write it back louder. They always go quiet when they read that. Some shift in their seats, some nod. One or two always look like they might cry. And I let the silence hang there, just long enough for them to know. This room is sacred. This is where the rewriting begins. I don't teach revenge. That part of me is done. I teach resilience. I teach boundaries. I teach the fine print no one ever reads until it's too late. I teach what no one taught me. How to spot the red flags that wear heels and lipstick and call you partner while drawing up paperwork behind your back. I teach how to build a startup that honors its makers. How to make sure that your signature isn't just decoration, it's power. And I teach it softly, not because I'm weak, but because I no longer have to raise my voice to be heard. The money that once would have gone to lawsuits now funds grants. Small ones. Strategic ones. For underrepresented founders who've been burned and are ready to rise. I've partnered with lawyers, with whistleblowers, with ex-CTOs who know what it's like to be told they're replaceable. We don't post about it. We don't need PR. The results are in the women who come back 1 year later, thriving, and thank me with quiet eyes and firm handshakes. And as for me, I'm not chasing headlines. I don't need to stand on stages or write memoirs or reclaim the company she stole. I built something better, not bigger, not flashier, just cleaner, stronger, rooted in the kind of integrity that doesn't need a spotlight to glow. Some days, I sit on the porch and read. Other days, I tinker with garden tech, sensors that track soil health, little gadgets that remind you when to water. My niece visits often now. She helps me plant new lavender every spring. We drink tea, steeped with lemongrass from the backyard, and talk about the tiny things, school projects, awkward crushes, which tomato variety tastes sweetest when sun-warmed. She once asked me if I hated my old friend. I told her the truth. I used to burn from it. But then I realized the best revenge isn't destruction, it's relevance. And I outlived her relevance a long time ago. What I want now is permanence. Not ego, not applause, just legacy. Something that breathes long after I'm gone. So I wrote it into paper. The legal kind. I signed the documents last week. A foundation, locked in name, purpose, and mission. Nobody can rewrite me again. And in that final clause, beneath the bylaws and budgets and board structure, there's a note. Quiet. Almost like a whisper in legalese. Forgiveness is not inheritance. I don't need her name. I don't need her apology. What I needed, I gave myself. Now, I sit in the sun, a steaming cup in my hands, the garden humming around me. There's a breeze soft through the trees, and for the first time in years, I am not waiting for anything. Not for justice, not for closure, just the sound of something growing, something mine, something good. Thank you for staying until the end. If my story touched something in you, share your thoughts in the comments, like this video, and subscribe to hear more stories just like this.